Today we're going to be talking about men's mental health and just how does that work in gender roles and men in general. I'm a man myself, and so I know from my perspective and being a therapist that men in general have a hard time really talking about their roles, their mental health, seeking help, and then how does that affect the relationships that men are in, whether it's a marriage relationship or a dating relationships. And so my guest today, I'm really excited. She is a licensed therapist out of Texas. Her name is Kristal DeSantis, and we're going to be talking about that, the male gender roles, male mental health, and all of everything in between. And she wrote a book that we're going to be talking about. I'm really excited about to be able to share with you. And she's going to be sharing her experience as well on the book and where you can get it. But I want us to kind of focus in on this whole idea of men seeking mental health and how important it is, and yet how often men resist that. And so I want to be talking about this. Really pay attention to this. If you maybe you have a man in your life, maybe your husband, a boyfriend, a son, a grandson, somebody in your life, or if you're a man yourself, I really want you to tune into this. And so let's talk about this. Kristal, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to talk about this. I love this topic.
Yes, I am too. And I'm really excited. I was really excited that you reached out, and because this is a topic that's so important. And yet I think so often, with my work as a therapist, I meet with a lot of men who almost come into the session sheepishly, right? It's like, ooh, I don't know if I really want to be here because this is really hard for me to talk about my emotions.
Absolutely.
And so when you reached out to me and they said, hey, I have a book, I wrote this book and this is what I do. Can I come on my show? And I'm like, yeah, let's get you on and let's talk about this. So, but before we get to your book and the topic, I want to know a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about you, your story. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. So I was always interested in psychology. So when I was in undergrad, I did a psychology minor, and actually I went to an all women's college. So I was very much kind of surrounded by, the messages that this society gives to women, right? So it was an excellent experience for me. But I didn't date at all in college. I was just like doing my thing, getting my degree. But I was really interested in psychology, and one of the specializations of psychology in undergraduate that I was really interested in was psychology in the workplace. So industrial organizational psychology. And so there was a time in my life where I thought I would be an IO psychologist. But in the workplace, it's mixed gender, right? And so that's really where I started recognizing different groups of people, different cultures have different cultural norms. And so that was really fascinating to me, like seeing how men interacted with each other in their like masculine culture, and then seeing how women interacted with each other in their more kind of feminine culture. And then, what happens when these kind of cultures bump up against each other, and what happens when they, create new cultures of workplaces or families or relationships. So that's really kind of what sparked my interest in all of this. And then, so I had my undergraduate degree for a little while, went out into the world, started working. And then I met my husband on a dating app, which I was saying before we went live, 13 years ago. And 13 years ago, meeting on an app was not something that you generally told everybody about. So, but it was something that really facilitated our connection, which, I could talk more about. But what I realized when I met him was, oh no, I don't actually have any skills to be in a relationship, right? So, I'd grown up with my parents who, ended up getting divorced. I went out and, kind of didn't really date because, I was focused on my career. And so then when I met my husband, I was like, oh gosh, I really like this man, but what do I do with this? Right. So there was chemistry, there was attraction, but I didn't know how to turn that into a long lasting relationship. And, based on my parents, divorce, and actually my husband had already been divorced once. And so he had a child from a previous relationship. So I was like very aware, I think, of the gravity of what it meant to actually have a long lasting, successful relationship. And I was like, I don't want to screw this up. I want to do it right, but how? And I ended up finding a licensed marriage and family therapist that I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't even know that you could learn and get a master's degree in relationship science. Cause I was focused on organizational industrial science. So anyways, I went to work personally with a marriage and family therapist. I learned so much about relationships. And, the man is my husband now, and it's 13 years later. So, fingers crossed that I learned something. And then I decided to go back to master's, get my master's degree in marriage and family therapy as well. So I could, kind of pass on and help other people that might be in the same situation that I was in. I have a lot of love. We have a lot of chemistry, but I recognize that doesn't always translate to skills for success in a relationship. So yeah, anyway, that was my story.
I like that. Yes. And so in a way, your past, your history has developed into you becoming a therapist yourself, and you wrote this book, and you're addressing such an important topic of how do women and men relate to one another. We spend a lot of time and energy about connecting the two. You mentioned this earlier, where it's the instant attraction, right? Dating apps is, you swipe to the left or right. I'm not even sure. You swipe away, right? Or you like somebody. So you have that instant connection with somebody, but where do you go from there? How do you develop those skills? And that's something that we're not taught. And most of us are not taught that by our parents. And in fact, we tend to see things that are not healthy in the marriage when we grow up, right? Because their parents didn't teach them. And so it's this thing that we're supposed to automatically know somehow is how do you relate to one another in a relationship? We're not taught that in school. We're not taught that anywhere. And so I love the fact that you're bringing this such an important topic to highlight this, because I think it's important for men and women to figure out how do you relate to one another, sustainability long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that was something that, I felt it. And I know that for some of my clients that they've named that as well, is that, with the way that we kind of glorify this romantic ideal of when it's the right person, everything just falls into place and love conquers all and it becomes, happily ever after. All you're looking for is that spark. And, I remember feeling but there is a spark, but maybe I'm just not destined to be in a healthy relationship because I didn't automatically get the download from the universe that here's what you do, and so I was, there was a point there where I almost thought maybe I'm just not meant to be in a relationship. Maybe I'm, in some way irrevocably broken because I grew up in a home that teaches skills. But I think that's where being able to reframe that as no, these are skills that you can learn. They're actionable items. And not everybody gets the privilege of learning that in their family of origin. But you can learn them at any point in life. And so now, I work with people across the lifespan. I work with, young adults, and I work with adults in their 70s and 80s who are trying to, do love well. And I just think that's such an empowering perspective, that, and honestly, if I can segue a little bit, that's partially why I've specialized in working with men. because one of the things I've noticed is the difference between maybe some of the ways that therapy has been presented is that, you know, you go into a room and then you just talk about your feelings and then you cry a lot and then you do it again next week. And then you lay on the couch and then you talk about your feelings and you cry. And for me, I was like, and then what? And so I think that's part of what I noticed also in working with men, with the hesitance of coming into therapy was like, so we're just going to sit and cry and hug and then talk about our childhood and then figure out that our parents didn't teach us things. And then what? And so with creating this book and this model, I really wanted to kind of have that more strength-based perspective, which is why my book is called S.T.R.O.N.G. Is, you know, these are things that will help you feel empowered in a relationship because they are actionable steps that you can learn and skills you can practice. And so, yeah, I found that a lot of my male clients very much resonated with that approach of like, sure, I'm happy to talk about my childhood or happy to kind of do some self-investigation as long as there is some tangible thing I can walk away from the session with and put into practice in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And it's not all about talking about your emotions, but your emotions is a big part of that at the same time. And I love how you phrased it where men will learn actionable steps. So often men, I think, are hesitant to going into therapy and they'll say something to the effect, well, I'm here because my wife wants me to do the X, Y, and Z, or I just don't know how to communicate. And I don't know. So they come to therapy knowing that something needs to change, but they don't know how to change it. And that's huge. And men in general, like, just give me a list, give me things, actionable steps to work on. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did in your book called S.T.R.O.N.G. And by the way, do you have a copy of it? I want to show it to us. If you're listening to this, you got to go to the YouTube channel. It's called S.T.R.O.N.G. Tell us a little bit about your book here.
Yeah. So again, when I was naming my therapy practice, and, you know, you're a therapist, so you know what that, you know, when you first are like, oh gosh, I'm going to start my practice. What should I call it?
Right.
And so, of course, I was like, I could call it Kristal, you know, therapy. But one of the things I really identified is though, even though I'm a woman, and this is a very heavily female-dominated field, I really had a passion for working with first responders and veterans. My husband is both of those things. And he had gone to therapy previously before we got together. So, you know, again, one thing I name in my book in the prologue is the reason this book is directed towards men and the reason I wanted to focus my practice on men is not because I'm, you know, like, men are the problem and we need to fix them, but that there just aren't as many resources directed to men. And that is part of the intimidation factor is I found, you know, for men going into therapy where they're like, it's going to be a very feminine space. It's going to be very unfamiliar to me. And so I wanted to make it as approachable as possible. So calling my practice S.T.R.O.N.G, breaking S.T.R.O.N.G down into an acronym that are the 6 essential elements of a healthy relationship. So it's, you know, safety, trust, respect, openness, nurturing, and
Can you hold it up a little bit? We can't really see. There we go. There, go start over.
Yeah. So strong, obviously, it's a powerful word. And then I broke it down into an acronym that stands for the 6 essential qualities of a healthy relationship. So number 1 is safety, right? I come from a trauma-informed approach. And so creating safety in a couple is number 1. T, trust, obviously foundational to a healthy relationship. Respect, which again, one of the things I heard a lot from men is that they don't feel love unless it comes with a side of respect. And so really kind of blending that into this approach of, yes, absolutely, respect is so crucial to a healthy relationship. So let's figure out what that looks like. So S.T.R. is kind of like my relational survival part of the equation. And then O.N.G, openness, nurturing, and generosity is about helping a relationship thrive. So, continuing to stay open throughout the lifespan so people don't grow apart. Nurturing, what does that mean? Especially for men, where a lot of the messaging in our society is like nurturing is a woman's thing. So really, how can you retain your kind of masculine stance and still be nurturing? And then generosity, which is just, I think, the fairy dust of the relationship. It's like, if you go online and you read any kind of like pop psychology articles, they always talk about like, do nice things for your partner. And it's like, yes, that is super important. And I'm in Texas, so it's kind of like lipstick on a pig unless you have the rest of it. So I'm like, generosity is so important. But also for men, I think kind of reframing that, because sometimes when men hear like, oh, of course women want us to be generous in a relationship, like, well, they want me to buy them stuff. I'm like, no. There are so many other ways that generosity shows up in a relationship that have nothing to do with your pocketbook,
I love it. I love that acronym. And looking at the cover of your book, I noticed that you have a compass on it. Tell me a little bit about why you have a compass on there.
Because it is, again, and that's why I call it a relationship field guide. Because one of the issues I had with trying to write a book is, relationships are not one size fits all, but it's good to have a general sense of like where you want to go, like what's your true goal, right? So I also love hiking. And so I'm like, every hike is different, but unless you have a compass as to like, where are you setting your true north? Like, what is your end goal? You're kind of, you're going to get lost in the woods. And so that's really,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's awesome. I love that analogy. I love stories and analogies like that. And, one of the common themes that I have had when I meet with men and male clients, they're searching for their identity and purpose in life. And, you get to a certain age in the relationship or in their life, and they're kind of wondering, well, what's the meaning of my life? I've made it this far. I feel like I don't know what the next step or next chapter of my life is going to be like. And so I love that analogy of that compass, because it's a lot about learning and discovering who you are on the inside. That's going to help guide you on the outside in your relationships.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I also wanted it to, I guess, illustrate that men are at a really interesting point when it comes to redefining gender roles and what masculinity means in this new kind of, iteration of our society. So in the prologue of this book, so obviously, I go through those, skills for safety, building trust, tools for repair and respect, all of that. But the prologue is also naming that, in the past, men were given kind of 3 Ps as to, what it means to be a man in the world and what it means to be a good man, right? And so it's like, be a protector, be a provider, and be a procreator, right? So these are kind of the essential 3 Ps of masculinity. And, there are a lot of men now, especially we need to bring masculinity back. Like, let's be protectors, let's be providers, let's be, procreators. And that's not a bad thing by any means. And that's, in fact, what I say in the book. It's like, I'm a heterosexual woman. I enjoy men and I really enjoy masculinity. I think there's a huge need for, healthy masculinity and mature masculinity, but also I think there needs to be a little bit of maybe talking about how these 3 things can evolve in a modern relationship. So what does it mean to be a protector in a modern relationship to a woman who maybe doesn't need your physical protection, but maybe she needs your emotional protection? Right? And what does that actually mean to help your partner feel safe and protected in the relationship? And it might not be about hitting the gym 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 hours a day. Maybe that's not what makes her feel safe. So what does, right? And again, I really wanted to approach this book and my work from this perspective of I really want men to be successful. It hurts me to see, so many men feeling, like you said, disconnected, lost, purposeless, identityless, and really hopeless. And, as mental health professionals, like that's not a good trend by any means. It's not good for our society. It's not good for men. It's not good for families. And so really just, I know you want to inhabit your protector. Let's give you some skills to do that in a way that's attractive to a modern woman. Right. And same thing, being a provider, like, okay, you want to provide for your family, but what if your wife is also an equal earner? Or what if she out earns you? What then? Like, do you not have a purpose in your relationship? Or what else might you provide? Right? Maybe you provide fun. Maybe you provide love. Maybe you provide, all presence, like all these other amazing qualities that have nothing to do with your net worth. Which again, like I'm seeing a rise in some of that messaging when it comes to, messaging about men and for men. I'm like, I don't think that's going to bring us closer to healthy relationships because that
Right.
once again kind of objectifies men.
Right.
Like you're just a wallet.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I think so many people equate status or maybe being popular or just where they're at in life, financial or power.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of confuse that in saying the richer you are, the more popular you are, the more powerful you are, the better man you are. And I think that has something that we in junior high, going all the way back in junior high, and we have the popular kids and the unpopular kids, and I think we tend to think that as we grow older that we put people in categories like that, and including ourselves, right? We put ourselves in these categories, and if I can check off all the boxes, if I've done this and I've achieved this and I'm able to do this, then I must be somebody. But what
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about, no. It's not about status. It's not about wealth. It's about you as the person and what defines you in your character. That is such an important message in today's world, is that character has got to be more important than status.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really, I think I wrote this book for men, but a lot of women have reported to me that they read it and they have learned some insights about kind of the messaging towards men that women don't get those messages. And one of the main things that like you just named, is men from a really young age, even, so young boys are often told that their worth is based on their performance, not their personhood. Right. And so then they, like you said, they work on checking these boxes. They work on, do I have, the most money? Do I have the best status? Do I have the coolest car? And then I'm going to attract a woman, and we're going to, again, this kind of fantasy about like, she's going to be attracted to me. There's going to be chemistry, and then we'll make it work. And what I've found, and so I name it in my book, is like there are relationships that are based on function, where it's this kind of box check, box check, box checked. And then there are relationships that are based on connection. But in order to have the connection-based relationship, you have to know kind of who you are as a person first. Otherwise, what is there to connect to? Right?
I love that. And I also love, Kristal, that you mentioned that this book is not just for men, it's also for women. And I think that mindset that I think a lot of men have developed from an early age, it kind of that mindset with a lot of women as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So women who are wanting a man,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they have in their mind what a man that they want should be, and they have their own list that they check off.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they're overlooking the whole character and personhood of the male rather than the position.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a whole other like conversation, a whole other podcast. But that's really what I say. the reason I wrote this book for men is so that men can feel a little bit more empowered coming into a therapy session. So they're like, I know what attachment is. I know what you mean when you talk about triggers. I know what, safety means in a relationship, whatever, all of that. But then also I do name in there that if we're going to ask men to change and kind of, evolve to this new iteration of what masculinity means, then what is our responsibility as their partners to provide a loving and open and, how is that then going to impact us? And in therapy and relationships, like anytime one part of the equation changes, it will require a change on the other part as well. But, maybe there's yeah. And I really do what I noticed is that women have been taking the lead in the relational space for a long time. And so that's part of why I wrote this book for men. It's like, I feel like it's also time for now men to start taking the lead. Because I also know that men feel really empowered when they can take the lead. And again, not like power over, but like empowered within.
Right.
Yeah. To really step into their leadership in a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And for men to like who they are, right? And realize that, oh, I don't have to do all these things. I don't have to be all of these things. It's about discovery and discovering who they are as a human and who they are in the relationship, if they're in a relationship, and who they want to become if they're not in a relationship, the type of man that they want to be for their future partner. I think that's fantastic. And so here's a question I wanted to ask. So let's say a male is listening to this and they're wondering, okay, I know I need to change something. I know I need to do something. I could go to therapy, but I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I don't know what steps to take. It sounds like from your book, when you were mentioning your book, that's a good first step, even before going into therapy, to learn about a lot of this before they even go into the therapy session.
Absolutely. And actually that's, if I can kind of share a little bit about the first chapter of the book.
Please.
Because safety, again, is such a big concept. So I break it down into 4 S's. So the first one is self-awareness. And that's really about, like you said, starting with yourself. Because one of the things actually was interesting, I had this conversation with my husband, is, in this society, I'm speaking specifically to American society, which I actually did not grow up here. Maybe that's why I sometimes talk that way. But I notice in American society, there's a huge emphasis on being in a relationship. So people start dating really, really young. And one of the kind of things in the self-awareness chapter is, do you know that you don't have to be in a relationship? And that being in a relationship is like having a full-time job. So it's totally valid to have a self-awareness of, I'm not ready for that right now. I really want to focus on my career, or I really want to focus on my own individual growth, or I really want to focus on, kind of intentionally taking a step back from dating. And that's a really, honestly, just starting with that self-awareness of, am I even ready to be in a relationship right now? And if so, why? Do I want to be, and am I looking for a casual dating, or am I looking for a long-term partner? And that's where, again, going to therapy and just kind of having a little bit of self-reflection, with a partner, with a trained therapist, is really, really useful for then entering into whatever relationship you're going to be in with intentionality and recognition of what you're bringing into, what part you're playing in the dynamic. So that's self-awareness, which is step 1. The second S of safety is stability. And that's honestly I don't know, John, do you see couples?
I don't currently, but I did when I had my private practice.
Okay. So one of the things I see so much with couples is how basic life skills stuff, chores, laundry, children, lunch, dinner, become kind of the grist of for the mill of conflict. And so what I kind of name is, when you can have basic life skills and have stability as an individual, then you're not seeking it in a partner. So you're not entering into relationships from a place of like, gosh, I wish somebody would help me clean my house. I wish somebody would help me balance my finances. Like, I wish somebody would like save me from this chaos that I've created. And so that's also a big skill that I emphasize when it comes to safety is like, do you have like life skills to maintain a safe life for yourself and for your eventual family? And then the next two is, skills for self-regulation. So, again, if you're in conflict and you don't know how to self-regulate, or if you're self-regulating by using alcohol or drugs or something that kind of disconnects you from yourself, that's going to be an issue when you get into a relationship. So again, starting with learning what you need to be self-regulated, to be self-soothed, to handle kind of what comes up for you, and then also identifying whatever triggers might be your old pain points, so that you can then recognize when you get into a relationship, like, is this my partner or is this my old stuff that's being triggered? Yeah. And then the final one is, of course, self-expression, which is, how do I talk about my emotions? Do I have the skills? Do I have the language? Or do I just, have like what I say, like mad, sad, bad, fine, okay? So really that's about like expanding your vocabulary and being able to talk about your emotions in a way that doesn't feel scary or overwhelming. Yeah. So these are my four S's of safety.
I love that. And I love the fact that that's the very first chapter. You get right into it, right? You get right into the heart of it. And it sounds very actionable, oriented, goal oriented. Hey, reflect, do some self-reflecting, but then let's put it to practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, I'm keeping an eye on our time here, Kristal, and I'm just envisioning someone listening to this. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe it's a husband, and the relationship is not the greatest, and maybe the husband is feeling some guilt or pressure, or I don't know, maybe some shame, or maybe it's a wife and the struggling in her marriage, and she's gone to her husband and begged him to go to therapy, and he's reluctant. Either scenario is someone who is questioning and trying to figure out what to do and work on, or questioning, I don't know if I want to go to therapy. I don't know what I should do. Maybe reluctant. This book is almost a perfect match for that, right? So whether it's a husband struggling with her husband, or a husband struggling with who he is, or even that's just one scenario. Another scenario is a single person trying to figure out who they are.
Mm-hmm.
What would be where can someone go to find this book, and tell us a little bit about where they can go and what they can do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is on Amazon, and I actually made sure that I got an Audible of it as well. So it is available
Oh, nice.
on paperback, on Kindle, and on Audible. I noticed a lot of people, I guess, especially my male clients, they really enjoy listening. So I wanted to make sure that that was an option as well. So yes, all three ways you can get it on Amazon. If you want a signed copy, you can go to my website, strong.love. And you can buy it on there, and I will send you a signed copy, and but it'll take a little bit longer because pop it in the mail and all that. I'm not Amazon, but and then I've started. I'm located in Austin, so I've petitioned to have it be put into the Austin library system. And I have friends. So if you have a library card, no matter where you are in the country, you can always request through your library that they stock a copy of the book, so you could get it for free. Again, this is really my passion, is creating healthier relationships. And a big part of that is having access to the information, which I found sometimes is the gap for men who feel like, I want a healthier relationship, but there's too much information out there. It's difficult for me to sift through. So that's kind of the barrier. And so again, with the book, I kind of distill it down into 6 very clear, actionable items. and that's why it's kind of a field guide. It's, it's kind of the Cliff Notes version of what all the information that's out there about healthy relationships, so that you can at least have a primer, have a direction, kind of set your compass a little bit. And then once maybe you get through my book, you'll feel more empowered to then either go to therapy or do some other learning from there.
I love that. That is awesome. So make sure you go, if you are listening to this and you're interested in it, make sure you go to Amazon or make sure you go to strong.love. Obviously, everything that you would need, it's on the show notes, so you can go there as well. So Kristal, I just really appreciate you coming on, spending some time to come on the show and talking about such an important topic. And this is something I think can bring a lot of hope to a lot of people. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I could talk about this all day. So thank you for letting me talk about it with you.
You're very welcome. And I want to thank all of you for listening to the show, to the Mental Health Today show. My name is John Cordray, the host and the licensed therapist. I appreciate you. And as always, I want you to continue working on your mental health. Take care, my friends. Until next time. Bye-bye.